Welcome to the debate. Today we are performing something of an autopsy on a single syllable. It's a sound that you might miss if you aren't listening for it. Two letters, really, alpha and iota. Now, in the mechanics of ancient Greek, this diphthong, a, is the grammatical marker for what linguists call the middle voice. And on the surface, that sounds like a dry grammatical category, something you memorize for a quiz and then forget. But the argument we are examining today suggests this specific sound is actually a fossil record. It is the preserved structure of a civilization's deepest intuitions about the nature of the self and the nature of the divine.
It is a fascinating thesis, I'll grant you that. The idea that a suffix isn't just a mechanical rule for conjugating a verb, like adding ed in English, but that it actually encodes a specific metaphysics, specifically a metaphysics regarding aseity or self-existence. But, we have to be rigorous here. My role today is to ask the uncomfortable question. Are we discovering this philosophy in the grammar, or are we maybe projecting it backwards onto a linguistic habit? We really need to determine if we're looking at theology or if we're just looking at morphology.
And that is the core question. Does language merely describe reality, or does it in some way structure it? My position today is that the Greek middle voice, it acts as a kind of closed loop of causation. I'm going to argue that this I suffix describes a state where the subject is both the fire and the hearth, to borrow a metaphor. I believe this grammatical structure didn't just help the ancients speak, it fundamentally defined how they understood the nature of God as a self-sustaining process.
The skeptical linguistic perspective. I want to look at the severe limitations of what we call diachronic inheritance, the idea that meaning survives intact across centuries of drift. I'm going to argue that we need to be extremely careful about overreading meaning into ancient mechanics. When phonology shifts, when the sounds themselves change in the mouth, meanings usually collapse or evolve. We just have to ensure we aren't seeing a cathedral where there's only a pile of bricks.
Fair enough. Let's begin with our position statements then to lay the groundwork. I want to start by asking you to look at a specific word, eramai.
Which is typically translated in the lexicons as I desire or I am in love.
Exactly. But I would argue that standard translation, I desire, it just strips the word of its architectural force. It flattens it. If we look at the source material, eramai is not a simple block. It's built from three distinct elements, almost like a chemical compound. First, you have the root ear. This carries the concept of eros. This is that foundational, almost violent drive toward beauty and union. It's the thing you cannot name without already, feeling its pull.
Right. It's the raw material of the verb. Then you have the connecting stem am, which acts as the bridge linking the abstract root to the living person. So far, we're just building a standard verb.
But then we hit the ending, the syllable I. This is the marker of the middle voice. Now think about English for a second. In the active voice, I do something to you. In the passive, you do something to me. But the middle voice announces that this desire is not something being done to another person. And it's not just being performed by a subject who remains separate from the action. The middle voice declares that the subject is the space within which the action occurs. So to say iramai is not to say I love someone in a transactional sense. It is to say I am the site of love. The longing is happening inside me, as me, through me. The self creates the loop.
I see the poetry in that definition. It paints a vivid picture of the self as a fire and the hearth that holds it, to use your phrase from earlier. It suggests an intensity that a simple I want just doesn't capture. But here is the legitimate objection, which is actually raised in the material itself. You're talking about ancient Greek, but the language didn't stay frozen in amber. You're building a philosophy on a sound I, but that sound is unstable.
Unstable in what sense?
In the physical sense, the way it hits the air. Consider the phonology. In classical Greek, that AI diphthong was pronounced clearly, like the vowel in sky or isle. It was open and distinct. But as the centuries ground on into Koine and then medieval Greek, that sound shifted. It underwent what linguists call monothunctonization. In modern Greek, it sounds like the short a in pet,
The sky became pet. The sound completely changed. My argument is that assuming a symbol carries the same deep philosophical intent across 3,000 years, just because it looks the same on paper, is a false analogy. We might be looking at a ruin and calling it a castle.
I understand the caution regarding phonological drift. The sound changed, absolutely. But let me offer a counter-perspective on inheritance. Languages do not rupture, they sediment. The pronunciation may weather away like the surface of a stone, but the bones of the language, the underlying logic of how verbal action is oriented, are far more conservative. They resist change. The argument I am making is that the middle voice isn't a decoration. It's a structural precondition. It describes a third space that English has largely lost.
Okay, let's drill down into that third space then, because I think that's where the mechanics of this get interesting and where the contrast with English helps clarify things for the listener. In English, generally speaking, we're binary. We view the world through a toggle switch.
Active and passive.
Correct. And that binary shapes how we view the world. In the active voice, action is a vector. It flows outward. I stop the cart. I hit the ball. The subject acts on the world. Energy leaves the subject and alters an object.
And in the passive voice, the vector just reverses. The cart was stopped by me. I was hit. The subject is the recipient. The subject is essentially a victim of the action, or at least a resting place for it.
And English stops there. We are either hammer or nail.
Exactly. English stops there. But Greek possesses this middle voice. It describes an action where the subject acts, but the action curves back to its origin. I stop myself. I experience within myself. It is a closed loop of causation and effect where nothing leaks out into the external world. It's not just about doing or receiving, it's about being the event.
I understand the definition, but I want to push on the implications. Is this truly a philosophy, or is it just a way of speaking? I worry we are taking a grammatical quirk, essentially a clerical convention for conjugating verbs, and elevating it to a metaphysical stance. Just because a language has a reflexivized form doesn't mean every speaker is a philosopher. Spanish has reflexive verbs, French has reflexive verbs. Is every French speaker a mystic?
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because the history of ideas suggests otherwise. Look at the timeline of Greek thought. Later in the timeline, you have the Stoics developing the concept of the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the soul. You have the Neoplatonists discussing the nous, the mind, returning to contemplate itself. These are complex, self-reflexive philosophical concepts. My point is that these weren't just ideas that happened to be written in Greek. They were ideas that Greek grammar had been quietly rehearsing for centuries. The middle voice was the structural precondition for that entire tradition of self-reflexive thought. The grammar was waiting for the philosophy to arrive.
That's a compelling causal link grammar as the incubator for philosophy. It suggests the tools shape the master. But if we're going to accept this sediment argument, that the bones of the language remain and inform thought, then you have to account for the modern speaker. This is the validity test for diachronic inheritance.
I'm happy to do so. In fact, I believe the modern usage strengthens the case for the closed loop.
Well, let's look at the evidence. The most common verb in modern Greek used millions of times a day is eimi. It means I am. It ends with that same I suffix. Now, are you really suggesting that every time a modern Athenian orders a coffee or says, I am tired, they are, engaging in a deep philosophical meditation on the nature of selfhood?
In a structural sense, yes. They are using the middle voice ending "mi" in the most fundamental assertion of existence. The word "eimi" didn't enter modern Greek as a borrowing or a revival. It descended directly. It was carried in the mouths of children for millennia.
But does the speaker know that? That's the crux of the diachronic objection. If I say I am in Greek today, I'm just using a linking verb. I'm not consciously thinking existence is happening within me. I'm just trying to get my point across.
Conscious intent isn't the only place meaning lives. The meaning is embedded in the mechanism. To say I am in Greek, eimi is. At the structural level, to say existence is happening within me. In English, I am is often just a static state, a copula. But the middle voice frames it as an interior process. The I suffix crystallizes the assertion that existence is self-generated and self-contained. Whether the speaker pauses to reflect on that or not, the grammar is forcing them to frame existence as an interior event, not a static label. They are participating in the philosophy simply by speaking the language.
I can concede that the bones are the same. Linguistic science does show that Greek is incredibly conservative in that regard. A modern speaker can read text from 2.5 millennia ago with surprising comprehension, much better than an English speaker trying to read Beowulf, which is basically a foreign language to us. But I want to pivot to where this gets truly heavy. We aren't just talking about human existence here. The material draws a direct line between this grammar and the nature of God.
Absolutely. This is the theological climax of the argument. We have to look at the intersection of Greek and Hebrew. This is where the mechanics of grammar collide with the mechanics of the universe.
Right, because the Old Testament wasn't written in Greek, it was written in Hebrew. So if we are going to claim that the Greek middle voice holds the key to divine nature, we have to look at what happened when the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, the Septuagint.
Precisely, and the material points to a fascinating convergence. We have the famous Hebrew divine name in Exodus 3:14. In English, it's usually translated as, I am that I am. When the Jewish scholars in Alexandria set out to render that into Greek, they chose the form ego eimi.
I am.
Yes, but specifically using that verb with the I ending. My argument is that this wasn't just swapping phonemes or finding the closest dictionary definition. They were importing the concept of God into a grammatical structure that explicitly supported the theology. They were importing aseity.
Aseity. Okay, for our listeners who might not be theologians, let's define that. It comes from the Latin esse, meaning from oneself. It is the theological term for existing entirely from one's own power, needing no external cause. It's the definition of the uncreated creator.
Correct. God is not a being who happens to exist. God is a process of being that is self-generated. The middle voice captures this perfectly. It describes a subject that needs nothing external to sustain it. The action of existence curves back on itself. It fuels itself.
But I have to stop you there. This is where I come at it from a different angle, specifically looking at comparative linguistics. We can't ignore the Hebrew side of this equation. The source material notes that Hebrew has its own very sophisticated system for this, the binyan system.
The verb stems.
Yes. Hebrew indicates action through modifying the root itself, and they have the hitpa'el stem. This is the reflexive intensive form. The material points out that the hitpa'el is the grammatical cousin of the middle voice. For example, when the Hebrew text talks about someone entering the state of prayer, internalizing it, it uses the hitpa'el. So my challenge is, if Hebrew already had this grammar of inwardness, why does the Greek translation matter so much? It seems like the theology was already there in the Hebrew. We didn't need the otai to unlock it.
I agree that the theology was there in the Hebrew, but that actually reinforces the significance of the Greek translation. The Septuagint translators didn't have to force a square peg into a round hole. They found the perfect vessel in the Greek middle voice to carry that hitpa'el logic.
So you view it as a compatibility of software, essentially.
Think of it as a resonance. When they brought the Hebrew concept of a self-sustaining God into Greek, the Greek language was ready for it. It had the I suffix waiting. And this leads us to the New Testament. When Jesus uses the phrase ego eimi, before Abraham was, I am, it's a shock to the listeners.
It's certainly a historical shock. He's claiming pre-existence, which is blasphemy in that context. He's claiming the divine name.
But it is also a grammatical shock. It is a claim to be a self-sustaining event rather than a static noun. To say ego eimi in that context is to claim the interior structure of being that the middle voice encodes, a self that is not the result of any prior cause. The Greek-speaking listeners in the temple would have heard this in the morphology itself. They wouldn't just hear a claim to power, they would hear a claim to a different kind of existence.
I suppose that's where the sediment argument has the most bite.
If the listeners were attuned to that frequency, the grammar itself becomes a theological statement. It turns the verb ending into a manifesto. But let's move this out of the abstract for a moment. The material discusses how this applies to the believer, not just the divine. This is where we get into the phenomenology of experience.
Yes, the text mentions the word menetai. It translates to abides or remains.
As in the Gospel of John, the image of the vine and the branches.
Right. He who abides in me. The verb menetai carries the I ending, its middle voice. This suggests that abiding isn't a visitation. It's not God stopping by for a weekend. It is a permanent condition of mutual indwelling. The grammar marks it as an interior condition. The subject is participating in the abiding, not just receiving it.
I find the analysis of kairamai even more interesting, actually. This is the verb for rejoices.
Rejoice in the Lord always. It's a common verse. We see it on bumper stickers.
Exactly. And because we see it on bumper stickers, we gloss over it. But consider the alternative. In the active voice, happiness or rejoicing is usually a reaction. You get good news, you rejoice. It's transactional. Something happens outside in the world, you win the lottery, the sun comes out, and you react inside. It is dependent on external stimuli. But the text notes that the middle voice form kairamai shifts the ground completely.
It relocates the experience.
It does. It suggests that this joy isn't a reaction to favorable circumstances. It's an interior state of the soul. It describes a condition that is happening within and through the person, regardless of the outside world. I have to admit, even as a skeptic of overreading grammar, that distinction is powerful. In this context, the grammar effectively relocates the phenomenology of the experience from an external reaction to internal sustenance.
That is precisely the closed loop I'm talking about. The command to rejoice isn't a command to feel happy about something. It's a command to enter a specific grammatical state of being. The self becomes the site where grace sustains itself. The I suffix implies that the joy is self-replenishing because it is connected to that ultimate I am.
It reminds me of the original word we started with, iramai.
I am the site of love.
Yes, it seems that whether we look at desire or existence, imai, or rejoicing, chiramai, the pattern holds. The middle voice collapses the distance between the actor and the action. It solves the problem of distance.
It creates a unity. And that brings us back to the ultimate unity. When we apply this structure to God, to the concept of aseity, we aren't just playing word games. We are defining God not as a static noun, but as a verb ending in I.
A fire that is its own fuel.
Exactly. The action does not leak out into the world. It doesn't depend on a receiver. It is the fire and the light and the burning all collapsed into a single self-sustaining motion. It is the burning bush that is not consumed, because it is middle voice. It feeds on itself.
You know, I spend a lot of time analyzing the drift of language, looking at how meanings get lost or diluted, and I still hold to my caution. We can't just assume every modern speaker hears this ancient echo when they order their lunch. We can't assume that grammar is always theology. But looking at this closed loop, I have to reflect on the idea that language might essentially know things that philosophy takes centuries to articulate.
That's an interesting point. How so?
Well, philosophers spent hundreds of years trying to define aseity and interiority. They wrote volumes on it. They argued about it in councils. But the grammar had a mechanism for it the whole time. The middle voice offers a compelling framework for understanding that kind of interiority, even if the speakers weren't writing treatises on it. It's almost as if the intuition was there before the intellect caught up.
That is the beauty of it. The grammar was waiting. The suffix was there. It suggested absolute existence isn't a label we apply to God, it is an event. And understanding the I suffix allows us to hear that event humming in the background of the text.
It really is a case where a single syllable opens up a worldview where the self is source, event, and recipient all at once. It creates a space where the distinction between inside and outside is surpassed.
And that is a perspective worth considering. Whether you view it as a divine ordinance or a linguistic evolution, the result is the same. A grammar that refuses to let the fire go out.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you hear a verb bend back on itself.
Indeed. Thank you for listening to the debate.
We hope this exchange has deepened your understanding of the material and the world within the words.
Thanks for joining us.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are doing something that, on paper, it sounds like the absolute driest topic we could possibly choose.
I can imagine.
And I mean that with all the love for our researchers, but when I saw the stack of notes for today, I had these flashbacks to 10th grade English class.
Oh no, not diagramming sentences.
Diagramming sentences, conjugating verbs, worrying about, dangling participles. It just brings up this very specific kind of academic boredom.
I know the feeling.
That feeling that we are just dealing with the red tape of language. It's like, here are the rules, go memorize them. Don't ask why, just put the comma where it's supposed to go, or you get a C-.
It feels like clerical work, doesn't it? Like you're just filing forms.
Exactly. Feels like filing paperwork for your mouth. But you have assured me, and the stack of research here absolutely insists, that we are not actually talking about rules today. We're talking about something else entirely.
We are. The whole premise of today's deep dive is that grammar isn't just a set of arbitrary rules that some, Victorian schoolmaster made up to torture children.
Okay.
The argument here, the big one, is that every single language conceals a philosophy, a deep philosophy that the speakers of that language have never consciously articulated, but they practice it every single day.
Hold on. So we're just walking around acting out a philosophy just by, ordering a coffee?
Precisely. Think of grammar as a kind of fossil record. When you dig up a dinosaur bone, it tells you everything about the world that creature lived in, right? How it moved, what it ate, the climate.
Yeah.
Well, grammatical structures, how we decide to conjugate a verb, how we use a suffix, all that boring stuff. Those are the fossilized intuitions of an entire civilization. They tell us what our ancestors thought about the self, about cause and effect, and about what it actually means to exist.
Okay, that is a very big claim. You're telling me that a suffix, a little piece of a word, can tell me the meaning of existence.
I'm saying that today, we are going to look at one specific syllable, just 2 letters. And if we really unpack it, if we treat it like that fossil, it implies a worldview that is so radically different from the one we have in modern English. It changes how we view human desire and eventually how we view the very nature of God.
A single syllable.
One single syllable.
All right, I'm deeply skeptical, but I'm listening.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin with that?
We start in ancient Greece,
Okay.
of course, and we start with a specific word that's going to act as our gateway. The word is eramai.
Eramai. E-R-A-M-A-I.
That's the one. It sounds nice, doesn't it?
It does sound pretty, so what does it mean?
Well, this is where the trouble starts. If you open a standard Greek-English lexicon, or even if you just threw it into an online translator right now, you'd get something like, I desire, or maybe, I am in love.
Okay, I desire.
Yeah.
That seems pretty straightforward. I don't see the big mystery.
Doesn't it? Let's just sit with that for a second. Let's look at how we understand that phrase in English. When you say, I desire a pizza, or I desire a promotion, what is the mental image of that action? What's happening?
The image,
Mm.
I guess.
Mm.
Well, I am here, the pizza's over there, and I want it. It's like a vector. I'm shooting a little arrow of want out of my brain,
Yeah.
and it's pointing at the object.
Exactly. It's transactional. You have a subject, which is you. You have an object, the pizza. And the desire is the bridge you're trying to build to get the thing. It's all about acquisition. You don't have it, you want it, you go get it.
Yeah, it's totally linear. It's A to B, simple.
That is exactly how the active voice works in English, and it's how we see most of the world. But the source material for this deep dive argues that translating eramai as just I desire is, well, it's a tragedy.
Tragic.
A linguistic tragedy. It strips the word of its structural power. It's like taking a nuclear reactor and saying, oh, it's a AAA battery. You've completely missed the point.
Okay, so what are we missing? What's the nuclear reactor part of this word?
To see it, we have to dissect the word. It's like we're back in biology class. We need to cut it open and see what's inside. The word has 3 basic parts: the root, the stem, and the suffix.
All right, let's do it. Start with the root.
The root is, should sound familiar. This is where we get the word eros.
Ah, eros. So romantic love, Cupid, that kind of thing.
Well, yes, but that's the modern sort of watered-down version. In the ancient world, Eros wasn't just dating. It wasn't just swiping right on someone. Eros was seen as a cosmic force.
A cosmic force.
Yes, it's the foundational appetite of the universe. It's the drive toward beauty, the drive toward union. It's that magnetic pull you feel when you stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon and you just feel small and connected at the same time. Or when you hear a piece of music that makes you cry for no reason.
So it's not just about people.
Not at all. It's the hunger to be one with something greater than yourself. It's the universe's own desire for wholeness. So that's the root. Big stuff.
Okay, so is the hunger, the deep cosmic hunger. Got it. What's next?
Right. Then you have the stem, which is M. That's just the connector. It's the thematic bridge, the bit of grammar that links that cosmic hunger to the specific person who is speaking. It's not that interesting for our purposes. And then we get to the suffix, the ending.
And that is?
AI, alpha iota. In the ancient dialect, it would have been pronounced I, like the word sky. Later on, that pronunciation shifted to sound more like the E in pet. But the spelling, critically, remained the same. This suffix, this is the smoking gun.
Smoking gun. Why? What does AI actually do to the word?
It marks the verb as being in the middle voice.
The middle voice. Okay, you've lost me. I've heard of active voice. I kicked the ball. I've heard of passive voice. The ball was kicked by me. I have never in my entire life heard of a middle voice.
And that's because English doesn't really have it anymore. We've mostly lost it, and with it, we've lost a whole way of thinking. We live in a binary world, grammatically speaking. You either do the action or the action is done to you.
You are the hammer or you are the nail.
That's it. That's how the world works for us.
But not for the Greeks.
Not for the Greeks. They had this third option, this third space, the middle voice. And the best way I can describe it is that the action is a loop.
A loop? What do you mean a loop?
Okay, so in the active voice, the action leaves you. It flows outward. I stop the cart. The energy goes from me to the cart.
Right. A to B again.
In the passive voice, the action comes from the outside and hits you. The cart was stopped by me. The energy comes to me. But in the middle voice, the subject performs the action, but the action, it curves back. It remains within the subject. The subject is both the doer and the receiver of the action.
Okay, my brain is bending a little bit. That feels very abstract. Can you give me a more concrete example?
Sure. A classic one is with the verb to stop. In active, I stop the cart. In middle, a Greek could say a form that means I stop myself, or even I stop for myself. The action originates with me and it terminates with me.
Okay, I think I get that.
Yeah.
Like when we say I find the keys, that's active. But what would the middle be?
I find for myself. The benefit of the finding accrues to me. The whole event is centered on my own experience.
So let's bring it back to eremai, the desire word. If we translate it with this middle voice loop in mind, what does it actually mean? It's not, I want that thing over there.
Exactly. It means something much closer to, I am the site where love is happening.
Wow. Say that again.
I am the site where love is happening. Or maybe I am experiencing love within myself. Do you feel the difference? The focus isn't on the object you want to grab out there in the world. The focus is on the internal state of your own being.
It's not about acquiring something. It's about experiencing something.
The fire of the desire is burning inside the hearth of the self. The self is both the fire and the thing that contains the fire.
That is actually really beautiful
Mm.
and profound. It makes desire sound less needy and more powerful.
It's a totally different orientation to the world. It implies that the most important things we do, loving, feeling, thinking, being, they aren't transactions with the outside world. They are fundamentally internal events. The subject is both the agent, the one doing it, and simultaneously the recipient, the one being affected by it. It's a closed circuit.
A closed circuit, so nothing leaks out. No energy is lost.
Ideally, in the grammatical sense, no. The energy is contained within the system of the self. Think about a simple example we still kind of have in English. The difference between I wash the car and I wash up.
Okay, I wash the car, I'm outside, scrubbing the metal. The action is on the car.
Active voice.
I wash up, well, I'm washing myself, my hands, my face.
You are the washer and the washee. The action returns to you. English has to add the little word up or myself to make that clear. We have to bolt on a workaround.
But Greek doesn't need the workaround.
Greek just uses the suffix ai. It's built right into the code of the verb. It's elegant.
So when an ancient Greek person used this word eremai, they weren't saying, I need to acquire that person over there. They were effectively saying, I am currently in a state of erosing.
Erosing. I like that, yes. I'm going to use that. They were defining their own interior reality, not just describing an external goal.
And this is where the philosophy comes in.
This is exactly it. And the source makes a huge point here. This grammar, this way of thinking, existed for centuries before the great philosophers we all know showed up.
Right, before Socrates, Plato, Aristotle.
We usually think those guys just invented all the deep thoughts out of nowhere. We imagine Aristotle sitting down under a tree and saying, hey guys, let's invent the concept of the soul. But the source argues that the grammar was already doing the philosophy long before Aristotle was even born.
The grammar was the rehearsal for the main performance.
Perfectly put. The Stoics talked about the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the inner self. The Neoplatonists talked about the nous, the mind, contemplating itself. The source is saying, you can't even begin to have those thoughts if your language doesn't have a built-in mechanism for a self that can act on itself. The middle voice was the software update that allowed Greek philosophy to run.
That is wild. So the philosophy wasn't a discovery. It was just an articulation of something they'd been saying every day when they bought bread or fell in love.
Every single time they opened their mouths, the intuition was already there, baked into the language.
Okay, but I have to stop you here. I have to play the skeptic because I feel like we're building a very tall, very elegant tower on a very, very small foundation.
Ayus, the argument needs to be tested. Bring it down.
We are talking about ancient Greek, a language spoken, what, 2,500 years ago? And we're putting all this weight on a sound, AI. But language has changed, right? I mean, I listen to teenagers today, and half the slang they use didn't exist 5 years ago.
Riz, skibidi, I hear ya.
And it's not just words. Pronunciation changes. The source material itself notes this, that the sound II shifted from that sky sound to a pet sound over time. So how can we possibly claim that this deep philosophical middle voice, meaning stayed the same for thousands of years? Maybe it just became a fossil. Maybe it's just a noise they made at the end of certain words out of habit, like how we say, or like.
That is a completely valid and very important objection. And honestly, if the source material didn't address it head on, I would have thrown the whole thing out. It's the central problem of anachronism, reading our own modern deep ideas into ancient noises.
Exactly. Are we just projecting? Are we seeing profundity where there's just
noise? The expert in the text counters this with a concept called diachronic inheritance.
Diachronic inheritance. Okay, that sounds like a legal term for what you get in the will.
Close enough. It's a linguistic term. Dia means through. Chronos means time, so inheritance through time. It refers to how languages transmit their core structures through generations. The argument goes like this. Vocabulary is the flesh of a language. It changes fast. Slang, new technology, new words, that's all skin and muscle. It grows, it sags, it gets tattooed.
Okay. Riz is a tattoo on the skin of English.
Riz is a tattoo. But grammar, how verbs work, how subjects relate to objects, how action is oriented, that is the skeleton. That is the bone structure of the language. And skeletons are incredibly conservative. They don't change easily or quickly. You can paint your house a different color every year, but you can't just decide to move the load-bearing walls without the entire thing collapsing.
So the argument is that the middle voice is a load-bearing wall in the house of Greek.
Exactly. And Greek is famous for this linguistic conservatism. A modern Greek speaker can pick up the New Testament, which is 2,000 years old, and read it with a level of comprehension that an English speaker can't even dream of with Old English. If you try to read Beowulf in the original, it looks like a foreign language. Oh, I've tried. It's impossible. Wait. Gardena and Girdigum. It's just sounds.
But the bones of Greek have held remarkably firm. And the source gives us what it calls the ultimate proof that the meaning and the force of the middle voice is still active, still alive.
All right, I'm ready for the ultimate proof. What is it?
It's one of the most common words in the modern Greek language, a word used every day, the word imai.
Imai? You spell this one for me.
E-I-M-A-I.
Imai.
Okay. What does it mean?
It means I am.
Just I am, like I am tired.
I am. The basic fundamental assertion of existence. And just look at the ending. I'm I.
It ends in the middle voice suffix.
It does. It absolutely does. Now, you have to really stop and think about what that implies. We say, I am 100,000 times a day. I am tired. I am hungry. I am here. In English, the verb to be is just a copula. It's an equal sign. It connects two things. I hungry.
Right. It's just a link. It connects me to a state or a place.
But in Greek, because of that suffix, I am, isn't a static equal sign. It's a middle voice verb, which means it describes an action.
Wait a minute. Being is an action. How can being be an action? It's the opposite of action. It's just stillness.
Not in this worldview. Being is an action that happens inside the subject. To say imai is to say, on a deep grammatical level, existence is happening within me, or perhaps even better, I am generating my own presence.
Whoa. Okay, hang on. Existence is happening within me. Let that sink in.
It means you aren't just a rock sitting there passively existing. Your being is an event. And it's an event that is self-contained. You don't get your being from the person standing next to you or from the chair you're sitting on. It's bubbling up from inside you. It's a process.
That turns I am from a simple label into, wow, almost like a heartbeat, a constant internal pulse of reality.
Exactly. A continuous internal heartbeat of reality. And the source argues that even if a modern Greek speaker doesn't walk around reciting philosophy, that deep intuition is baked into their cognitive map. When they say I am, they are activating a different part of their brain, a different model of reality than we are when we say it.
It's like they have a different operating system running in the background.
A completely different OS, yes. And this is where the deeper theological implications start to get really, really interesting. Because if being itself is a middle voice action, a self-contained, self-generating loop, then what happens when we start talking about the ultimate being? What happens when we apply this grammar to God?
Okay, before we jump to the big guy, I wanted to check something else. Because so far, this is all very Greek-centric.
Yeah.
And usually when we talk about deep theology or ancient scripture on the show, we have two main pillars. We have Athens, the Greek world, and we have Jerusalem, the Hebrew world.
Right, the two wells we draw from.
So does this idea hold up in Hebrew? Because Hebrew is a Semitic language. It's a completely different family. It reads right to left. It doesn't have the same roots, the same history. If this is just some weird quirk of Greek grammar, then maybe it's just a fascinating coincidence and not a universal truth.
That is the perfect question to ask right now, and the source material anticipates it. It calls Hebrew the second witness.
All right, let's bring in the second witness. Court is in session.
So Hebrew does not have a middle voice by that specific name. It's not an Indo-European language, but it has its own system that achieves a very similar result. Hebrew verbs rely on a system called binyanim.
Dianim.
It means structures or buildings. Yeah. In English, if I want to change the nuance of a verb, I have to add more words. I say, I will do, or I caused him to do, or I did it intensively. We add adverbs and helper words.
Sure.
In Hebrew, you don't add words. You actually bend the root of the word itself. You change the vowels and the prefixes to slot the root into a different building, a different binyan.
Like transforming a base material into different shapes.
Kind of, like linguistic origami. There are 7 main buildings. Some are for simple actions, some are for intensive actions, some are for causative actions. But there is one specific binyan, one specific building that acts as the direct grammatical cousin to the Greek middle voice. It's called the hit pale.
The hit pale. And it does the loop thing.
Does the loop thing. It indicates an action that is reflexive, acting on oneself, or reciprocal. It's the verb form for inwardness. And what's absolutely fascinating is when the Hebrew Bible chooses to use this specific form.
Okay, give me the highlights. Where does this pop up?
Let's take the act of prayer. In English, we say he prayed. It sounds, again, very transactional. He read a grocery list of requests to the sky. Subject, verb, object.
Dear God, please send rain and a pony.
Right. But the Hebrew word that is often used for this kind of intense personal prayer, hitpalel, is in the hitpale form. Grammatically, it implies that the person praying is acting upon themselves.
Wait a second. So when I pray, I'm not trying to change God's mind. I'm changing my own.
Grammatically, yes. The primary action is internal. The word's root is related to judgment. So to pray in the hitpale is to judge oneself, to bring oneself into alignment. The action of prayer is an internal loop of calibration. You aren't just broadcasting a signal out, you are tuning your own receiver.
That makes a lot more sense, actually. It feels more like what prayer actually is or can be.
Yeah.
You go in anxious, you come out peaceful. You've performed an action on your own internal state.
Exactly. Here's another one. Sanctification, the act of making something holy. We usually think of that as God zapping us with a holy ray gun from heaven. You are now holy.
Zap. You've been sanctified.
But the word used for this process, hitkadesh, is very often in the hitpale. It means to sanctify oneself, to make oneself holy. It describes the internal process of internalizing that state of holiness. You aren't just painted white on the outside, you're becoming white from the inside out.
It's the hearth again. The fire is inside.
It's the hearth. Every time. So you have these two massive foundational civilizations, the Greeks and the Hebrews, totally separate linguistic families, and they both preserve this specific, unusual grammatical logic. They both agree that the most critical actions, being praying, changing, loving, are fundamentally internal loops.
There's a quote in the source material I highlighted. Grammatical logic tends to survive everything that does not.
That's the one. It gives me chills. Empires fall, temples are burned to the ground, entire peoples are scattered, pronunciation shifts. But the logic of the hit pail and the logic of the middle voice, it survives. It's incredibly stubborn. It's in the bones.
Okay, so we've established the mechanism. We had the loop. We have the self-contained fire. We have two independent witnesses confirming it.
Huh.
Now, the source material takes us to a very specific moment in history where these two worlds, these two witnesses, collide.
Yes, the theological convergence. This is the moment it all comes together.
This is what I've been waiting for. Set the scene for us. Where are we?
We are in Alexandria, Egypt. The clock is somewhere around 200 or 300 years before Christ. Alexandria is the intellectual capital of the world, and it's a Greek-speaking city. You have a massive Jewish community there, but they've been living in this Greek world for generations. We're losing their Hebrew. Their kids can't read the scriptures anymore.
So they need a translation. They need to translate the Hebrew Bible into the common language, which is Greek. This is the origin of the Septuagint.
The Septuagint. And this is such a high-stakes moment in intellectual history because translation isn't just swapping words. It's not just finding the Greek word for God and the Hebrew word for God. You are swapping entire worlds. You are trying to pour the ancient Semitic concept of God into the philosophical container of Greek grammar.
And the Greek container has this middle voice, this idea of the internal loop built right into its core.
Right. And the collision, the great flashpoint, happens at arguably the most holy and mysterious verse in the entire Torah. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14.
A burning bush.
Moses is standing there at the bush. It's on fire, but it's not being consumed. It's not turning to ash. And he asks God, "Who are you? If I go back to the Israelites in Egypt and tell them a voice spoke to me from a fire, they're going to ask for a name. What is your name?"
And God says,
In our English Bibles, it's translated, "I am that I am."
I am that I am. It's incredibly enigmatic. It's powerful, but grammatically in English, it's just a repetition. It doesn't tell you much.
It sounds a bit like Popeye if you're not careful. I am what I am and that's all that I am.
It does a little bit, yeah.
But look at what the Greek translators did. They had this Hebrew phrase, Eheya, Asher Eya, and they had to capture this idea of absolute ultimate existence. And the verb they chose was ego eimi.
Amy, the word we just talked about, the I am verb.
The word with the middle voice ending, the word that means existence is happening within me.
Okay, let's slow down and really chew on this because this feels like the absolute climax of the argument. When God says I am, using a middle voice verb, what is he saying about his own nature that's different from everything else?
He is drawing the ultimate line in the sand between himself and every other thing in the entire universe. Think about you and me. We exist. I am here. You are here.
Check. We exist.
But why do we exist? We exist because our parents met. We exist because there's oxygen in this room for us to breathe. We exist because we ate breakfast this morning. Our existence is contingent. It relies on 1,000 outside factors. We are like lamps plugged into a wall socket. If you pull that plug, our light goes out.
We are completely dependent on things outside of ourselves.
Totally dependent. But God, when God uses the middle voice to describe his own being, he is making a claim to a quality theologians call aseity.
Aseity. A-S-E-I-T-Y. Define that for us.
It comes from the Latin phrase ase, which literally means from oneself. Aseity is the quality of existing entirely from and through oneself. It means that God is the only being in the universe who contains his own battery pack. He doesn't have a plug. He is the wall socket.
He is the power plant.
He is the power plant. His existence is a self-generated, self-sustaining, eternal loop. He doesn't need the universe to exist. He doesn't need worshipers to exist. He doesn't need a prior cause or a creator. He is the uncaused act of existing itself.
And that loops right back to the image of the burning bush, doesn't it?
It's the perfect visual metaphor. That's the whole point. Why was the bush burning but not being consumed?
Because it wasn't using the wood as fuel. The fire wasn't taking anything from the bush.
Exactly. If you light a campfire, the fire eats the wood. It's transactional. The fire takes energy from the wood in order to sustain itself. That's an active voice fire acting on wood.
With the burning bush.
The fire was self-sustaining. It didn't need the wood. It was burning from itself. It was a middle voice fire.
Middle voice fire.
Yeah.
That is That's a staggering image. I'll never see that story the same way again.
It means God is not a noun. He's not a static thing sitting on a golden throne somewhere. God is a verb ending in AI. He is an event of absolute infinite power that acts upon itself to generate all of reality.
It makes I am sound a lot less like a name tag and more like the deep hum of the cosmic generator that runs everything.
That's it. That's the vibration of the text. And the source is clear that this understanding carries straight into the New Testament.
Oh, Jesus, I'm guessing.
Of course. The Gospel of John is filled with these moments. Jesus has these famous standoffs with the religious leaders. And in John chapter 8, verse 58, he drops the hammer. They're arguing about his authority, and he says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am."
Ego eimi.
Ego eimi. And the text says they immediately pick up stones to execute him for blasphemy. Now, Sunday school usually teaches us, oh, they were mad because he claimed to be older than Abraham, or he was using a divine title for himself.
Yeah, who do you think you are? Making yourself equal with God.
But the source argues the shock was deeper. The shock was grammatical.
A grammatical shock.
Imagine someone standing in front of you, a human being, a man wearing sandals, covered in dust from the road, and he uses the grammar of aceity to describe himself.
He's looking at them and he is saying, my existence is not caused. I am a self-sustaining loop. I do not have a plug.
I am my own ground. In that culture, for a man to say that, that is the ultimate blasphemy. That is claiming to be the uncaused cause. The listeners in the temple, they knew Greek, they heard the middle voice, they heard the suffix, and they understood he wasn't just saying he was special, he was claiming to be the fire, not the bush.
That gives me chills. It really changes the entire scene from a theological debate to a collision of two different realities. He's speaking from a different dimension of grammar.
He is. He's speaking the language of the divine interior.
So we have this incredible mind-bending picture of God, the self-sustaining loop, the fire that needs no fuel. But we are not God.
We are not.
We are regular people. We have plugs, we need oxygen, and we need coffee. So does this middle voice stuff apply to us at all? Or is it just a God thing that we can admire from a distance?
No, it absolutely applies to us. In fact, the source argues that the entire goal of the spiritual life, at least in the Christian mystics tradition, is to get invited into that loop.
To get into the loop.
To participate in that self-sustaining life. To plug our lamp into the eternal power plant. And there are two key words the source highlights that apply this divine grammar to human beings. They are beautiful examples of this.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first is the word menetai.
Menetai. Meneta.
Exactly. It is usually translated in the Bible as abides or remains. You know the famous line from John 15, abide in me and I in you.
Abide. Such an old-fashioned word. It makes me think of the dude abides.
It does, but what does it really mean? If I come to your house and I abide with you for a week, I am a guest, I am distinct from the house, I am visiting. It's an active voice kind of situation.
Right. You are there, but you aren't part of the house. You're just a temporary occupant.
But menetai ends in AI. It's middle voice.
So middle voice abiding. What on earth does that mean?
It implies what the mystics called mutual indwelling. It means the abiding isn't a visitation. It's a permanent state of being where the distinction between the guest and the host starts to blur and dissolve.
So when the text says God abiding in me, it doesn't mean he's like a tenant renting a room in my brain.
No, that's a passive idea. This is a middle idea. It means God has become an interior process of your own being. The abiding is happening as you. The self-sustaining loop of God's own life is now running through your circuitry. You're sharing the same power source.
That is heavy. That completely dissolves the barrier between inside and outside.
It does. And the second word is even more practical, I think, for daily life. It's the word kairomai.
Kairomai.
It means to rejoice.
To rejoice. Now, be honest. When someone tells you to rejoice, especially when you're not feeling it, what is your immediate reaction? Honestly, annoyance. Because usually I'm in a bad mood and someone says cheer up or rejoice. And my first thought is, give me a reason. I need a stimulus. I need to win the lottery or get some good news. My happiness depends on something happening to me.
Exactly. We think of joy as a reaction. Input A, good news, leads to output B, feeling of joy. That's classic active-passive transactional thinking.
It's all external.
But chairmai is a middle voice verb.
So joy is a loop. How is joy a loop?
It means that true joy, the kind the scriptures talk about, is a state that is generated from within. It is not a reaction to the weather. It is not a reaction to the stock market report. It is a self-sustaining fire.
So when the text says rejoice always, it's not giving an impossible command. It's not saying pretend to be happy about everything.
Yeah, that would be insane and dishonest. It's
Well-
saying enter the middle voice of joy. Enter the interior state where joy generates itself, where it sustains itself, regardless of what is happening on the outside.
That completely changes it from an emotion that happens to you to a discipline
Yeah.
or a power source you can tap into.
It's a mode of being. It's a command to become the site at which grace sustains itself. You become the hearth.
I love that. You become the heart. It puts the agency back in our hands.
Yeah.
We aren't just victims of our circumstances floating around waiting for a little scrap of happiness to fall off the table for us.
We can become the generators, or rather, we can learn to plug into the one true generator.
Wow. We've covered a massive amount of ground here. We started with a grammar lesson that sounded like high school detention, and we've somehow ended up redefining the nature of God and the source of human joy.
It's the power of the deep dive, one little syllable at a time.
Let's try to synthesize this. Let's put it all back together. The fire and the hearth, as you put it.
Right. We started with eremai, desire.
Desire not as a grab for something external, but as an internal state of being.
Then we moved to emai, the verb to be.
Being not as a static fact, but as a continuous internal event.
Then we looked at the divine name itself, ego eimi.
God as the self-fueling fire, the ultimate middle voice verb.
And finally, we looked at how this applies to the human experience. Through abiding, menetai, and rejoicing, charamai.
The invitation to become a participant in that divine loop.
The thread that connects them all is that tiny persistent suffix, the alpha iota, AI. It's the grammatical marker that says, this action does not leak out. This action is the fire that is also the light and also the burning.
Source, event, and recipient all collapsed into a single self-sustaining motion.
Yes.
It really, really makes you look at language differently. I mean, we usually think that we invent words to label the stuff we see in the world. That's a rock, that's a tree, we're in charge.
Right. We think we are the masters of our speech.
But this entire deep dive suggests the opposite. It suggests the language knew things long before we did.
That is the haunting thought the source leaves us with. That language contains a philosophy that it took us as a species centuries to articulate consciously. The grammar was waiting. The suffix was sitting there in the mouths of farmers and soldiers and merchants, holding this incredible secret about the nature of God, just waiting for someone to stop and notice it.
It's humbling. It makes you feel like when we speak, we are stepping into a stream of logic that is much, much older and maybe wiser than we are.
And we are still using it. Every time we say, I am, even in our transactional English, we are unknowingly echoing that ancient self-generating assertion.
So here is the challenge, I think, for you, the listener, and for me, honestly.
Let's hear it.
Slow down. Look for the loops in your own life. Where in your day are you operating in the active voice? Just chasing things, grabbing things, acquiring things? And where are you operating in the passive voice? Just letting life happen to you, letting it hit you in the face.
And then where can you find the middle voice?
Where can you be the fire and the hearth at the same time? Where are you generating your own patience, your own kindness, your own joy, your own being from the inside out?
That's the real question.
And I'll leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought today. I wanted it. If ancient Greek was hiding the secret of aseity and the nature of God in the little two-letter suffix, what on earth is English hiding?
Oh, that's a good one.
What deep philosophies are we enacting right now in this very conversation that we don't even know about? What will a linguistic archaeologist in the year 4000 find in our grammar that explains why we were so anxious or so obsessed with time or so whatever it is we are?
The fossil records are being written as we speak.
Something to think about next time you conjugate a verb. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.